My son-in-law mocked me in front of his entire firm, laughing, as he ordered security to throw me out like trash. He told his colleagues I was a senile old man who had wandered in from a homeless shelter. He didn't know that the battered leather briefcase I was clutching contained the deed to a $20 million property portfolio I was there to let him manage. And he certainly didn't know that the building he was standing in was built on land I cleared with my own hands 30 years ago. By the time he realizes who I really am, he won't just lose his job, he will lose everything. If you have ever been underestimated by the very people you sacrificed everything for, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The revolving glass doors of Apex Capital Partners in downtown Chicago hissed shut behind me, cutting off the biting wind of the loop. The silence inside was immediate and intimidating. It smelled of expensive espresso and sanitized money. My sneakers, comfortable but worn down at the heels, squeaked slightly against the polished Italian marble floor. I adjusted my windbreaker. It was a navy blue thing, faded at the shoulders, the same one my wife Catherine had bought me 10 years ago at a discount store. She always said it brought out the blue in my eyes. Now it just made me look invisible. I walked toward the reception desk. The woman behind the granite counter didn't look up. She was typing furiously, her Bluetooth headset blinking. I waited. I cleared my throat. She finally lifted her eyes, scanning me from my thinning gray hair down to my scuffed shoes. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed just a fraction. It was the look you give a delivery driver who has walked through the front entrance instead of the loading dock. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, though the tone suggested she doubted I had any business being there. "I am here to see Brandon Cole." I said, my voice raspier than I intended. I gripped the handle of my briefcase tighter. It was old leather, cracked in places, the stitching coming loose on the side. To her, it probably looked like something I salvaged from a dumpster. To me, it was the briefcase I carried the day I signed the incorporation papers for Caldwell Logistics 40 years ago. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, her hand already hovering over the security button. "Not exactly," I admitted. I wanted to surprise him. "He is my son-in-law." She paused, skepticism written all over her face. She was about to say something, probably to tell me that Mr. Cole was busy, when the elevator banks behind her chimed. A group of men stepped out. They were laughing, a loud, confident sound that echoed in the high ceilings of the lobby. They wore bespoke suits that cost more than my first truck. In the center of them was Brandon, my son-in-law. He looked the part of the successful portfolio manager perfectly. His hair was styled with precision, his teeth were bleached white, and he was checking the time on a gold watch that glinted under the chandeliers. "Brandon!" I called out, taking a step forward. The laughter in the group died instantly. Brandon looked up. For a second, just a split second, I saw panic in his eyes. He recognized me. He knew exactly who I was. But then, as he felt the eyes of his managing partners on him, the panic vanished. It was replaced by a cold, sneering mask that made my blood run cold. He didn't walk over to greet me. He didn't smile. He stopped 10 feet away, putting a safe distance between his Italian wool suit and my nylon windbreaker. "Security!" he shouted, his voice booming. "Why is the front door unguarded?" The other men looked confused. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, leaned in. "Brandon, do you know this gentleman?" Brandon let out a sharp, derisive laugh. "Gentlemen, look at him. He clearly wandered in from the wrong street. The soup kitchen is 3 blocks west, old-timer. You are in the wrong tax bracket to be standing on this carpet." The cruelty of it took my breath away. I stood there frozen. I expected him to be annoyed, maybe embarrassed that I showed up unannounced. But this was a performance. He was performing for his colleagues, using my humiliation to boost his own status. "Brandon." "It is me, Harrison," I said quietly, trying to maintain some dignity. "I have something for you." I lifted the briefcase slightly. Inside that leather shell were the transfer documents for 3 industrial warehouses I had sold last week. $5 million in liquid cash ready to be invested. I had come here today to give him the account, to give him a commission that would have cleared his debts and secured my daughter's future. Brandon stepped forward and slapped the briefcase with the back of his hand. It wasn't a hard hit, but the dismissal was violent. Dust motes danced in the air where he struck the old leather. He immediately brushed his sleeve as if he had touched something contagious. "I don't know who you are, old man, but you are making a scene," Brandon hissed loud enough for everyone to hear. "Take your trash and get out before I have you arrested for trespassing." 2 security guards in dark blazers materialized at my elbows. They were large men, professional but firm. One of them gripped my arm. "Sir, you need to leave," the guard said. I looked at Brandon. I looked deep into his eyes, searching for a trace of the young man who had sat at my dinner table 5 years ago and promised to take care of my daughter, Emily. I saw nothing. Just greed and fear masked by arrogance. I didn't fight the guards. I didn't scream. I didn't pull out the bank statements that would have silenced the entire room. I simply nodded. "You are making a mistake, Brandon," I said softly. He didn't hear me. He had already turned back to his colleagues, rolling his eyes. "Can you believe the city lets them roam around like this? It is a security hazard." Anyway, as I was saying about the merger, the guards escorted me to the revolving door. They pushed me out, not gently sending me stumbling onto the sidewalk. The cold Chicago wind hit me again, but it felt warm compared to the chill in my chest. I stood there for a moment, clutching my briefcase, watching through the glass. I saw Brandon laughing again, clapping the silver-haired man on the back. He had no idea. He didn't know that in 1990, I was the one who stood on this very lot, wearing work boots and a hard hat, supervising the demolition crew that cleared the ground for this skyscraper. He didn't know that my name is on the original cornerstone dedication plaque, hidden behind the decorative bushes he walks past every morning. He stands on my sweat, on my history, and he calls me a beggar. I turned and walked toward the parking garage. I didn't park in the guest lot. I parked on the street 3 blocks away, where my 2010 Ford F-150 wouldn't look out of place. It was a good truck, reliable. It had carried me through the years when I built Caldwell Logistics from a single van into a fleet of 500 semi-trucks. I kept it because it reminded me of where I came from. Brandon probably thought I drove it because I couldn't afford anything else. I climbed into the cab. The smell of old upholstery and faint diesel fumes was comforting. My hands were shaking as I put the key in the ignition. Not from fear. From a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text message from Emily. "Dad, Brandon just texted me. He is furious. He said you came to his office and caused a scene. He said you looked confused and dirty. The partners were asking questions. Please, Dad. Tonight is not a good night for dinner. Brandon says he needs space. Maybe we can try again next week." I stared at the screen. The manipulation was instant. He hadn't just humiliated me. He had already spun the narrative to isolate me from my own daughter. He was painting me as the senile, embarrassing burden to ensure Emily wouldn't believe a word I said. I looked at the briefcase on the passenger seat. $5 million in that bag. And another $15 million in my brokerage account. I had lived quietly since Catherine died, downsizing to a small bungalow, driving this old truck, wearing old clothes. I did it to teach them the value of money, to see if they loved me or for what I could give them. I guess I just got my answer. I started the engine. The old truck roared to life, a deep, guttural sound. Next week, I whispered to the empty cab. There wouldn't be a dinner next week. Because by next week, Brandon Cole wouldn't have a job to go to. I put the truck in gear and pulled out into traffic. The sad, confused old man act was over. It was time for the chairman to come out of retirement. The engine of my Ford F-150 idled with a low, rhythmic rumble that usually calmed me, but today the vibration only seemed to amplify the tremors in my hands. I sat there in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. It was not fear that made me shake. I had not felt true fear since the night in 1982, when I risked my last dollar on a fleet of 3 used delivery vans. No, this was rage. A cold, sharp, suffocating rage that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. I looked down at my hands. They were calloused, spotted with age, the nails cut short and practical. To the world, these were the hands of a retired laborer, perhaps a man who had spent his life fixing fences or driving roats, scraping by on a pension. To Brandon, they were the hands of a failure. He saw the age spots and the tremors and assumed they belonged to a man who had lost his grip on the world. He did not know these hands had signed contracts worth millions. He did not know these hands had shaken the hands of senators and shipping magnates. He did not know that these hands had built an empire from dust. My phone buzzed against the center console, a harsh, jarring sound in the quiet cab. I stared at it. The screen lit up with a notification. It was a message from Emily. My sweet, gentle Emily. The daughter who used to sit on my lap while I reviewed shipping manifests, who used to beg to honk the horn of the big rigs. I picked up the phone, swiping the screen with a thumb that felt heavy as lead. Dad, the message read, Brandon just called me. He is really upset. He said you came to his office and made a huge scene. He said you were shouting and confusing people. He told me he felt humiliated in front of his partners. I stopped reading for a moment, my breath catching in my throat. Humiliated. He felt humiliated. I had walked into his building quietly. I had waited patiently. I had spoken in a low voice. The only one shouting, the only one causing a scene was him. He was the one who had called security. He was the one who had mocked me. But he had gotten to her first. He had spun the narrative before I even made it back to my truck. I looked back at the screen to read the rest. Please, Dad, the text continued. Tonight is not a good night for dinner. Brandon says he needs space to cool down. He thinks it is best if you do not come over. Maybe we can try again next week when things are calmer. I am sorry. I lowered the phone. The silence in the truck was deafening. Don't come over. Those 3 words hit me harder than the security guard's shove. My own daughter was uninviting me from her table, not because she wanted to, but because she was afraid. I could hear the fear in her text hiding between the lines. She was apologizing for him. She was managing his anger, trying to keep the peace by sacrificing her relationship with me. My thumb hovered over the call button. The instinct to fight was overwhelming. I wanted to call her right now. I wanted to tell her the truth. I wanted to scream that her husband was a liar, that I had come to give him a gift, not to embarrass him. I wanted to tell her about the $5 million in the briefcase sitting on the passenger seat. I wanted to tell her that I wasn't a confused old man, that I was Harrison Caldwell, and nobody treated me like this. But I stopped. I froze. If I called her now, what would happen? She was at home, probably in the kitchen, maybe preparing the dinner. I wouldn't be eating. Brandon would be calling her, poisoning her mind, yelling at her for my alleged behavior. If I called, I would just be another angry voice in her ear. She would be caught in the middle, and right now she was scared of him. If I forced her to choose between her husband and her father in this moment, she would choose the husband. Not out of love, but out of survival. That was how deep his manipulation had gone. I placed the phone back on the console face down. I couldn't save her by yelling. I couldn't save her by being the angry old man Brandon accused me of being. I adjusted the rearview mirror. The man staring back at me looked tired. His eyes were blue, but they were framed by deep lines. His hair was thinning and white. He wore a faded windbreaker that had seen better days. It was a disguise, a costume I had put on after Catherine died. I closed my eyes and let the image shift. I remembered the man in the mirror 10 years ago. That man wore tailored suits from Italy. That man walked into the headquarters of Caldwell Logistics in Lake Forest, and 500 people stood up straighter. I remembered the sound of the dispatch radios, the hum of the servers, the roar of 500 semi-trucks rolling out at dawn to deliver goods across the entire Midwest. I was the chairman. I was the man banks called when they needed to know the health of the shipping industry. I was the man who could shut down a supply chain with a single phone call. When Catherine passed, the silence in the big house became unbearable. The money, the status, it all felt hollow without her. And then there were the kids. I saw how money ruined my friends' children. I saw them become lazy, entitled, waiting for their parents to die so they could cash out. I didn't want that for Emily. I wanted her to be strong. I wanted her to find a man who loved her for her, not for the Caldwell fortune. So I stepped down. I put the money in trusts and real estate in diversified portfolios, managed by people who knew how to keep their mouths shut. I sold the big house and moved into the bungalow. I bought this truck. I played the part of the retiree living on a fixed income. I told myself I was teaching them a lesson in self-reliance. I thought I was giving them the gift of independence. I opened my eyes and looked at the shabby old man in the mirror again. "You fool," I whispered. I had made a catastrophic miscalculation. I thought hiding my power would make my family stronger. Instead, it had made me vulnerable. By pretending to be weak, I had given a predator like Brandon permission to hunt me. He looked at me and saw prey. He saw a senile old man who could be bullied, pushed around, and eventually discarded. He didn't fear me because he didn't know me. And Emily. My poor Emily. By hiding my resources, I had left her without a safety net. She was struggling, counting pennies while I sat on a mountain of gold, terrified that helping her would spoil her. I hadn't spoiled her. I had abandoned her to a wolf. The guilt washed over me heavier than the rage. I had let this happen. I had watched Brandon's arrogance grow for years, biting my tongue, thinking he was just young and ambitious. I had let him talk down to me at Thanksgiving, let him make jokes about my cheap beer, let him criticize my clothes. I took it because I thought I was being humble. I thought I was being a good father-in-law. But humility without boundaries is just submission, and I was done submitting. I looked at the Apex Capitol building one last time through the windshield. The glass tower pierced the sky, arrogant and shining. Somewhere on the 30th floor, Brandon was probably pouring himself a drink, laughing with his colleagues about the bullet he had dodged, about the crazy father-in-law he had kicked out. He probably felt powerful. He probably felt invincible. Let him, I thought. Let him enjoy this victory. Let him think he has won. I put the truck into gear. The transmission clunked, a solid mechanical sound. I wasn't going to call Emily back. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table. I wasn't going to complain to her. I was going to destroy the ground he stood on. I pulled away from the curb, merging into the chaotic Chicago traffic. I didn't drive toward my small bungalow in the suburbs. I drove toward the highway. I needed to go to Lake Forest. I needed to go to the climate-controlled storage unit where I kept the life I had left behind. It was time to hang up the windbreaker. It was time to open the boxes I hadn't touched in 2 years. It was time to find the Italian suits, the silk ties, and the platinum cards. Harrison, the retiree, was dead. He died on the sidewalk outside Apex Capitol. The chairman was back, and he had a meeting to arrange. As I merged onto the highway leading toward Lake Forest, the hum of the tires on the asphalt sent my mind drifting back to the dinner table just 1 week ago. It was a memory that had been gnawing at me, a scene that played over and over in my head like a bad movie I could not turn off. The humiliation I felt today at his office was loud and public, but the humiliation I felt last Friday night was quiet, intimate, and in many ways far worse. I remembered sitting at their dining room table, the one I had paid for, when they moved in. Brandon sat at the head, of course, leaning back in his chair, with the casual arrogance of a man who believes he owns the world. In front of him stood a bottle of red wine, a 2015 vintage that I knew retailed for over $300. He handled the bottle with a performative flair, swirling the dark liquid in his oversized crystal glass, inhaling the bouquet with his eyes closed as if he were a sommelier. He did not offer me a glass. He had poured me a beer, a cheap domestic brand, that he kept in the back of the fridge specifically for when I visited. He took a sip of the wine and sighed with pleasure, then set the glass down with a heavy thud, intentionally letting his left sleeve ride up. The gold and blue metal caught the light of the chandelier. He twisted his wrist, checking the time, then checked it again 5 seconds later. He was practically begging us to look. "Notice anything different?" he asked, flashing a grin that showed too many teeth. Emily looked up from her plate. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing a sweater I recognized from her college days. She squinted at his wrist. "Is that new?" she asked, her voice flat. Brandon laughed, a sharp bark of a sound. "New. It is not just new, babe. It is a Rolex Submariner. Blue dial, Cerachrome bezel. I have been on the wait list for 6 months. $15,000 on my wrist right here." He held it up for me to see, dangling his arm over the table. "What do you think, Harrison?" he asked. "Pretty sharp for a Tuesday, right?" I looked at the watch. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, I had to admit. I had 3 of them sitting in my safe deposit box, vintage models that were worth triple what he had paid for this flashy modern version. I looked at the watch, and then I looked at my daughter. She wasn't looking at the Rolex. She was looking at her plate, pushing around a piece of broccoli with her fork. "It is very nice, Brandon," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Nice," he scoffed. "It is an investment. That is what you don't get. This watch holds value. It appreciates. Unlike that truck of yours." Emily cleared her throat softly. "Brandon, since you got the bonus, do you think I could get the tires checked on the sedan? The warning light came on again yesterday, and the front left one looks really bald. I slid a little when it rained on Tuesday." The air in the room changed instantly. Brandon's smile vanished. He lowered his wrist and picked up his wine glass, taking a long, slow sip before answering. He looked at her with a mixture of annoyance and pity, the way one might look at a child who asked for candy before dinner. "Emily, we have talked about this," he said, his tone condescendingly patient. "We are liquidity constrained right now. I just put everything into the market. This watch was a necessary purchase for my image. Clients need to see success to trust me with their money. Tires are a sunk cost. Just put some air in it at the gas station. Stop being so wasteful." Wasteful, I thought, feeling a vein throb in my temple. My daughter was driving on bald tires in the rain, risking her safety, and he was calling her wasteful while wearing the price of a small car on his wrist. I gripped my steak knife tighter. I looked down at my own plate. Brandon had grilled steaks for the occasion. On his plate sat a thick marbled ribeye cooked to a perfect medium rare. On my plate was a thin gray slab of meat that curled at the edges. It was a flank steak, the cheapest cut in the case, overcooked until it had the texture of shoe leather. I sawed at it with my knife, the serrated edge struggling to cut through the gristle. I put a piece in my mouth. It was dry and tough. I chewed slowly, forcing myself to swallow. It tasted like disrespect. He had bought the good meat for himself and the scraps for his father-in-law. Brandon watched me struggle with the steak, a smirk playing on his lips. "You know, Dad," he said, using that term he knew I hated coming from him. "You really should have listened to me about that crypto fund last year. You would not be counting pennies with your pension check right now." I took a sip of the lukewarm beer. "I am doing just fine, Brandon," I said. "Fine is relative," he chuckled, swirling his $300 wine. "See, that is the problem with your generation. You guys worked for money. You traded hours for dollars. Driving trucks, sweating, breaking your back. That is the old way. It is inefficient. I make my money work for me. I sit in an air-conditioned office and move numbers around, and I make more in a week than you probably made in a year hauling freight. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a cruel sort of glee. If you had just learned to invest, if you had a little financial literacy, you would not be eating dinner here out of charity. You would not be driving that rust bucket. You could have left something for Emily. But do not worry. I will take care of her since you couldn't. I stopped chewing. The piece of tough steak sat heavy in my cheek. I looked at him. I looked at his soft hands that had never held a shovel. I looked at his arrogant face, and then I thought about my morning. I thought about sitting in my small kitchen with a cup of coffee, opening my laptop, and logging into my primary brokerage account. I thought about the notification that had popped up on the screen at 9 a.m. sharp. Quarterly dividend payout received. The number was etched into my mind. $812,450. That was just one quarter. That was just the passive income from stocks I had bought 30 years ago and never touched. I had made almost $1 million while I slept, while I drank my coffee, while I drove my old truck to the park. I could buy his firm. I could buy the dealership where he leased his car. I could buy the vineyard that made his wine. I looked at Emily shrinking in her chair, believing she was poor, believing she was a burden. I swallowed the steak. It went down like gravel. "You are right, Brandon," I said, my voice steady, betraying nothing of the firestorm inside me. "I am just a simple man. I do not understand your world of high finance." He laughed, satisfied. "Exactly. Stick to what you know, Harrison. Leave the money to the big boys." I had stayed silent then. I had let him win the moment. I had finished my cheap steak and drank my cheap beer and thanked him for the meal. I had hugged Emily goodbye and slipped $100 bill into her coat pocket when he wasn't looking, whispering to her to fix the tire. But now, driving toward Lake Forest with the humiliation of the morning fresh in my mind, that memory was no longer just a painful recollection. It was fuel. He thought I was weak. He thought I was poor. He thought I was stupid. He had confused silence for stupidity. He had confused modesty for poverty, and that was going to be his fatal error. I saw the exit for the storage facility approaching. I signaled and turned the heavy steering wheel. The truck handled the curve with a familiar groan. I wasn't just a simple man. I was a man who had waited. I had waited to see who he really was. I had waited to see if he would step up or if he would stumble. And now that I knew, now that he had shown me his true face over a cheap steak and a flashy watch, I was done waiting. The chairman was about to give Brandon Cole a lesson in financial literacy he would never forget, and the tuition was going to cost him everything he had. I sat in the silence of the climate-controlled storage facility parking lot, the engine of my truck finally cold. The metal gate of Unit 402 stood in front of me, a steel curtain hiding the life I had put on pause. Inside that unit were my Italian suits, my handmade leather shoes, and the physical remnants of the man who used to command boardrooms. But before I could open that door and step back into my old skin, I needed to confirm something. I needed to know exactly how deep the rot went. The memory of the steak dinner and the bald tires had been festering in my mind. It was one thing for Brandon to be arrogant. It was one thing for him to be cheap with his father-in-law. But the way Emily had asked for those tires, the fear in her eyes when she spoke about money, it didn't sit right. A man who buys a $15,000 watch on a whim does not refuse his wife's safety equipment unless there is something far more sinister at play than just greed. I pulled my phone out again. My thumb hovered over Emily's contact. I needed to perform a stress test. In the logistics business, before we sent a truck out on a long haul, we tested the brakes. We applied pressure to see if the system would hold or if it would snap. I needed to apply pressure to my daughter's life to see what broke. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was tight, breathless, as if she had been crying or running. "Hello, Dad," she said. "I thought we agreed not to talk tonight. Brandon is still really mad." "I know, sweetheart," I lied, keeping my voice calm and sounding a little desperate. "I am sorry to bother you. I really am. But I am in a bit of a jam." "What happened?" she asked, the worry instant in her tone. "I am stuck over on the east side," I said, spinning the fabrication. "The truck died. The alternator, I think. I found a mechanic who can fix it right now, but his card reader is down. He needs cash." "Oh no," she said. "Are you okay?" "I am fine, but I don't have enough on me. It is $500, Emily. Can you transfer it to me? Or maybe bring it over? I will pay you back as soon as my pension check clears next week." $500. To the Emily I raised, the daughter of Harrison Caldwell, $500 was lunch money. To the wife of a high-flying portfolio manager earning $300,000 a year plus bonuses, $100 should be nothing. It should be an afterthought. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A long, heavy silence that screamed louder than any scream. "Emily," I asked gently. I heard a sharp intake of breath, and then the dam broke. She started to sob. It wasn't a polite cry. It was the jagged, panicked weeping of someone who has been cornered. "I can't, Dad," she choked out. "I can't give it to you." "Honey, it is okay," I said quickly, my heart hammering. "If you don't have the cash on hand, a transfer is fine." "No, you don't understand," she cried, her voice rising in hysteria. "I don't have it. I don't have anything." "What do you mean you don't have anything?" I asked, my grip on the phone tightening. "Brandon makes a fortune, Emily. You live in a $2 million house." "Brandon has the cards," she whispered, as if he might be listening from the walls. "He took them all away last year. He said I was bad with money. He said I was spending too much on groceries and coffee. He cut up my credit cards, Dad. He gives me a digital allowance on an app, but he tracks every cent." I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the Chicago weather. This wasn't budgeting. This was captivity. "He says he is investing everything for our future," she continued, sniffing. "He says we are liquidity poor right now because he is building an empire for us. He puts everything into accounts I can't see." "Emily, listen to me," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "Do you have access to the joint account?" "No," she said. "He changed the passwords. He said I would just be tempted to waste it." "Dad, I am so sorry. I look in my wallet right now and I have $6. I don't even have $20 to buy you lunch, let alone $500 to fix your truck. I am useless. I am a useless daughter." "You are not useless," I said fiercely. "You are being abused." "No, he is just strict," she defended him automatically, the programming running deep. "He is a financial genius. He knows better than me." I closed my eyes. A financial genius. A financial genius earning $300,000 a year does not leave his wife with $6 in her pocket. A financial genius does not refuse to replace bald tires on a family car. There were only two explanations for this. One, Brandon was a sadist who enjoyed controlling every breath his wife took. Or two, and this was the thought that made my investigator's brain tick, Brandon didn't have the money. The Rolex, the expensive wine, the trips he bragged about on social media. It was all a facade. You don't lock down your wife's spending to save on coffee if you are swimming in cash. You do it when you are drowning. You do it when you are robbing Peter to pay Paul. He wasn't investing it. He was hiding the fact that it was gone. "Dad, are you still there?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "I am here, honey," I said, forcing warmth back into my tone. "Listen to me. Do not worry about the truck. I will figure it out. I have a stash I forgot about. But you are stranded, she said. I am fine, I assured her. Go wash your face, drink some water. Do not tell Brandon I asked for money. He will just get angry that I am being a burden, and I don't want to cause you any more trouble tonight. Okay, she whispered. I love you, Dad. I love you too, Emily. More than you know. I hung up the phone and stared at the dark dashboard. The rage I had felt earlier was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. My daughter wasn't just married to a jerk. She was married to a fraud. I ran the numbers in my head. A senior portfolio manager at Apex Capital. Base salary of $300,000. Performance bonuses that could double that. Even after taxes and the mortgage on that overpriced house in Lincoln Park, there should be $20,000 a month in disposable income. Where was it going? You cannot spend $20,000 a month on wine and watches without it piling up. Unless he wasn't buying them. Unless he was leasing the lifestyle. Or worse. Gambling. Debts. Or a second life I knew nothing about. Brandon Cole wasn't just a bully, he was a desperate man. And desperate men are dangerous. They lie. They steal. And when they get cornered, they bite. He had isolated Emily so she wouldn't see the holes in the boat. He had painted me as a senile old man, so no one would listen if I pointed out the water rising. He had convinced her she was incompetent, so she wouldn't ask why the accounts were empty. It was brilliant. It was evil. And it was about to end. I looked at the storage unit again. I didn't just need a suit. I needed ammunition. I opened the contact list on my phone and scrolled past to the family names, past the old friends until I found a name I hadn't called in 5 years. Patricia Knowles. She was the best forensic accountant and private attorney in Chicago. She was the woman I used to call when I wanted to acquire a competitor and needed to know where the bodies were buried. She cost $1,000 an hour, and she was worth every penny. I pressed the call button. It rang 4 times. Harrison, her voice was crisp, professional, but surprised. I saw the news about Catherine years ago. I didn't think I would hear from you again. I am coming out of retirement, Patricia, I said. Is it a merger? She asked. No, I said, watching a stray leaf blow across the asphalt. It is an investigation. I need you to dig into someone. I want to know every cent they have earned, every cent they have spent, and every debt they are hiding. Who is the target? His name is Brandon Cole, I said. He works at Apex Capital, and I want to know why my daughter has $6 in her pocket while her husband wears a Rolex. I can meet you in an hour, she said. Where there is a diner on 4th Street, I said. The one with the greasy burgers. Come alone. And Patricia, yes, bring the big shovel. We are going to need to dig deep. I hung up and stepped out of the truck. I unlocked the storage unit and rolled up the metal door. The smell of cedar and expensive fabric hit me. My old life was waiting in the dark. I walked in and pulled the dust sheet off my favorite navy Brioni suit. Brandon thought I was a confused old man who wandered in from the cold. He was about to find out that I was the one who built the storm. The neon sign of Joe's Diner buzzed with a dying electrical hum flickering against the gray Chicago sky. It was the kind of place where the menu was laminated and sticky, the coffee was burnt, and nobody asked questions. I pulled my truck into the cracked asphalt lot, parking next to a rusted sedan. This had been my office away from the office for 30 years. Back when I was building the company, I used to come here to think, to escape the sterile boardrooms and the endless demands of shareholders. It was the only place where I could just be a man with a cup of coffee, not the chairman of a logistics empire. I walked inside. The bell above the door jingled a familiar welcoming sound. The smell of frying bacon and stale cigarette smoke hit me. It wasn't pleasant to most, but to me it smelled like honesty. I took a booth in the back corner facing the door. Habit. Always face the door. I ordered a black coffee and waited. 10 minutes later, a silver Mercedes S-Class pulled into the lot. It looked like a spaceship landing in a scrapyard. The driver's door opened and Patricia Knowles stepped out. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit that probably cost more than the diner's annual revenue. Her heels clicked sharply on the pavement as she approached the door. She paused for a fraction of a second before touching the greasy handle, then pushed it open with a look of determined professionalism. She scanned the room. Her eyes swept over the truck drivers and the weary waitresses without judgment, but with a clear sense of displacement. When she saw me, her expression softened. She walked over, clutching a quilted black Chanel bag against her side, as if protecting it from the airborne grease. "Mr. Chairman," she said, sliding into the booth opposite me. She didn't call me Harrison. To her, I would always be the chairman, the man who gave her firm its first $1 million retainer. "Patricia." I nodded. "Thank you for coming to the slums." She placed her bag on the vinyl seat first, laying down a silk handkerchief to protect the leather. "Old habits die hard, sir. You always did prefer the low ground. I prefer the ground where people tell the truth," I said. "And right now I am surrounded by liars." The waitress came over with a pot of coffee. Patricia waved her away politely but firmly. She wasn't going to drink the sludge they served here. I took a sip of mine. It was bitter and hot. So she said, clasping her hands on the table, "You said you wanted to dig a grave. Metaphorically speaking, I hope." I looked her in the eye. "I want a full forensic audit on an individual. Personal finances, hidden assets, gambling debts, offshore accounts. I want to know what he buys at the grocery store, and I want to know who he owes money to." "Name Brandon Cole," I said. "He is my son-in-law." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "The one at Apex Capital, the same. I thought he was the golden boy," she said. "Catherine used to tell me how charming he was." "He is charming," I admitted. "That is the problem. Charm is cheap, integrity is expensive, and I think Brandon is bankrupt on both counts." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Patricia, my daughter Emily called me tonight crying because she didn't have $500. Her husband, who wears a $15,000 watch and drives a Porsche, has cut off her access to all funds. He claims he is investing it. He claims they are liquidity poor." "Liquidity poor," Patricia repeated, the lawyer in her waking up. "That is a very specific phrase. It is usually what people say right before they get indicted for a Ponzi scheme." "Exactly," I said. "He is controlling her with money. He has isolated her. And today, when I went to his office to offer him a business opportunity, he had me thrown out by security because I looked too poor for his image." He did what she asked, her eyes narrowing. "He humiliated me," I said. "But that is not the point. The point is desperation. A man who treats his wife like a prisoner and his father-in-law like a beggar isn't acting out of strength. He is acting out of fear. He is hiding something massive. And I need to know what it is before he drags my daughter down with him." Patricia pulled a sleek leather notebook from her bag and a gold fountain pen. She opened it to a fresh page. "Where do we start?" "Start with his employment record," I said. "He claims he is a top earner. Verify it. Check his commission structures, then check his debts. I suspect gambling. He checks his phone every 30 seconds during dinner, always looking at sports scores. That creates a specific kind of desperation. And check the house. See if there are liens against it that Emily doesn't know about. If he is forging signatures," Patricia noted, scribbling rapidly. "That is felony fraud. If he is forging signatures," I said, "I will put him in prison myself." I watched her write. It was a relief to be back in this mode. For 5 years I had been the grieving widower, the passive old man. It felt good to be the shark again. "This is going to be expensive, Harrison," she said, looking up. "Private investigators, forensic accountants, rush fees. To get this deep, this fast, you are looking at a significant retainer." I reached into the inner pocket of my windbreaker. I pulled out a checkbook. It wasn't the one connected to my pension account, the one I used to pay for groceries at the discount store. This was a black leather checkbook, heavy and sleek. It was connected to the family trust, the liquid capital account, that I hadn't touched since the day I sold the logistics company. I opened it and uncapped my cheap plastic pen. I wrote the date. I wrote the name of her firm. And then I wrote the number. $50,000. I tore the check out with a crisp rip that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet booth. I slid it across the sticky table. "Start with this," I said. "If you need more, call me. I don't care what it costs. I want him naked. I want to know the color of his soul." Patricia picked up the check. She looked at the number, then at me. A small smile played on her lips. "It is good to have you back, Mr. Chairman," she said. "I am not back," I said, finishing my coffee. "I am just cleaning up a mess I let fester for too long." She tucked the check into her bag. "I will have a preliminary report in 48 hours. But Harrison, be careful. If he is as desperate as you think, and he finds out you are digging, he could become dangerous. Narcissists don't like being exposed." "I am counting on it," I said. "I want him to panic. I want him to make a mistake." Patricia stood up. She smoothed her skirt. "I will call you." She walked out of the diner, the silver Mercedes roaring to life a moment later. I sat there for another minute watching the steam rise from my empty cup. The waitress came over with the pot. "Warm it up, hun," she asked. "No, thank you," I said. "I have work to do." I left a $20 bill on the table for a $2 coffee. It was the first time in years I hadn't counted the change. I walked out to my truck. The air felt sharper now. The game had begun. Brandon Cole thought he was the hunter. He thought he was the apex predator because he had a corner office and a shiny watch. He didn't realize he had just picked a fight with the man who owned the forest. I pulled out my phone. I sent a text to Brandon. "Hi, son. Sorry about the confusion today. I must have gotten my dates mixed up. I am just an old man getting forgetful. I won't bother you at work again." I hit send. Let him think he won. Let him think I was retreating. Let him get comfortable. Because when Patricia came back with that file, I wasn't just going to knock on his door. I was going to blow the house down. I started the truck and headed home. But first I had one more stop to make. I needed to see the land. The family plot in the country that Brandon had asked about. The one thing he thought I had left of value. If he wanted to sell it so badly, I needed to know why. And I had a feeling that the answer was going to be the key to his destruction. I sat in my armchair in the living room of my bungalow, the one with the drafty windows and the peeling wallpaper. It was a humble space, deliberately so. I had bought this place 5 years ago, to downsize, to simplify, but mostly to test the waters of my family's affection. It was a test they had failed spectacularly. I looked at my phone. The message I had drafted was simple, designed to trigger the specific greed reflex I knew Brandon possessed. "Hi, son," I typed, my thumb hovering over the keypad. "I am sorry about earlier. I was confused. I have been thinking about what you said about my pension not being enough. Maybe you are right. I think it is time to sell the 40 acres in Galena. I want to move into that assisted living facility near the lake. Can you help me find a buyer?" I hit send. I set the phone on the side table and waited. I didn't even have time to walk to the kitchen to pour a glass of water before the screen lit up. It had been less than 30 seconds. "Dad," the reply read, "don't worry about today. We were all just stressed. Selling the land is a great idea. It is the smart move for your future. I can be there in 20 minutes. Do not call anyone else. I will handle it." 20 minutes. He lived 40 minutes away in traffic. He must have been driving before he even finished typing the message. I sat back and watched the dust motes dance in the afternoon sun. The land in Galena was a beautiful plot, rolling hills and timber, that had been in my family for 3 generations. It was prime real estate now worth at least $2 million to developers. Brandon knew that. He had been eyeing it for years, making subtle comments about how it was a waste of capital sitting there undeveloped. What Brandon did not know was that the land wasn't mine to sell. I had transferred the deed to a trust in Emily's name 3 years ago as a silent safety net. If he tried to sell it, he would hit a legal wall. But I wanted to see how fast he would run toward that wall. I heard the roar of his Porsche in the driveway exactly 22 minutes later. He parked crookedly, 2 wheels on the grass I tried to keep neat. I stayed in my chair, adjusting the blanket over my legs to look more frail, more defeated. The door opened without a knock. Brandon breezed in, bringing a gust of cold air and the scent of expensive cologne mixed with nervous sweat. "Dad," he exclaimed, his voice dripping with a synthetic warmth that made my stomach turn. He rushed over to me, kneeling by the chair. He looked different than he had this morning. The arrogance was still there, but the edges were fraying. His tie was loosened, his top button undone. There was a sheen of perspiration on his upper lip, despite the chill in the room. "I am so glad you texted," he said, patting my knee. I felt terrible about what happened at the office. The partners were just pressing me, and I snapped. "It wasn't you, it was the stress. You know how it is." I nodded slowly, playing my part. "I know, son. I shouldn't have come unannounced. I forget how important you are now." "You are not forgotten, Dad," he said quickly, his eyes darting around the room as if checking for listeners. "Now about the land. You are making the right choice. This place," he gestured vaguely at my modest living room, "this place is depressing. You deserve better. You deserve care. And the market for raw land is peaking right now. If we wait, you might lose value. We need to move fast." "Fast," I repeated. I thought these things took time. "Not with my connections," he said. He pulled a folded document from inside his jacket pocket. It was already creased, as if he had been carrying it around for days, waiting for an opportunity. "I actually have a potential buyer in mind, a developer I work with. He offers cash. Quick close. No inspections." He smoothed the paper out on the small coffee table. I leaned forward, squinting as if my eyesight were failing. It was a limited power of attorney form, granting Brandon Cole full authority to sell real estate on behalf of Harrison Caldwell. "I just need you to sign this," he said, producing a gold pen. "This authorizes me to negotiate the best price for you. That way you don't have to deal with the stress of meetings or lawyers. I will handle the headache. You just collect the check." I looked at the paper, then at him. His hand was shaking slightly as he held out the pen. His eyes were wide dilated. He wasn't looking at me with concern. He was looking at me like a starving wolf looks at a wounded deer. I reached for the pen, moving my hand with agonizing slowness. I saw his breath hitch. He was practically vibrating with anticipation. My phone on the table buzzed. Brandon flinched violently, his head snapping toward the sound. "Who is that?" he asked sharply. "Just a spam call," I said. He glanced at his own phone, which he had placed face up on the table. The screen lit up with a notification. I caught a glimpse of it before he snatched it away. It wasn't an email from a client. It was a text message from a number saved only as Vegas. The message was short, "Time is up." I saw the color drain from his face. He shoved the phone into his pocket and turned back to me, his smile now looking more like a rictus of pain. "Dad, please sign it. We need to get this process started today. The buyer might walk if we don't lock him in by 5 p.m. "By 5 p.m., I asked innocently. "That is very specific. He is leaving the country." Brandon lied, the sweat now visible on his forehead. "For a business trip. We have to secure the deal. Do it for Emily. Do it so you don't have to be a burden on her anymore." That word. Burden. He knew exactly where to twist the knife. He thought shaming me would make me compliant. I took the pen. I held it over the signature line. Brandon stopped breathing. "You know," I said, pausing, "I think the deed is in the safe deposit box at the bank downtown. I can't sell it without the physical deed, can I?" No, the power of attorney is enough to start," he insisted, his voice rising in pitch. "We can get the deed later. Just sign the authorization." I lowered the pen. "But I want to make sure I get a good price, Brandon. My father bought that land in 1950. It means a lot to me. Maybe I should have my lawyer look at this contract first, just to be safe." Brandon slammed his hand down on the table. The noise was shocking in the small room. "We don't need lawyers," he shouted. "Lawyers will just take a cut. They will bleed you dry." "I am trying to help you, old man. Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" He caught himself. He realized he had shouted. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up. "I am sorry," he said, his voice trembling. I am worried about you. I want you to be secure. If you involve lawyers, it will take weeks." "We don't have weeks." "Why don't we have weeks, Brandon?" I asked softly. "Because the market is volatile," he snapped. "Look, just sign the paper. Trust me. I am the finance guy. Remember, I know what I am doing." He was unraveling right in front of me. This wasn't just a man who wanted extra spending money. This was a man who was terrified. The text message from Vegas, maman. The sweat, the desperation for a signature that would give him control over a multi-million-dollar asset instantly. It all pointed to one thing. He owed money, a lot of money, and he owed it to people who didn't send late notices in the mail. I looked at the document again. If I signed this, he would try to sell the land immediately. He would find out it wasn't in my name, and the game would be over. But I needed more. I needed to know exactly how much he owed and to whom. I needed to trace the debt to protect Emily from the fallout. I picked up the pen again. "Okay, son," I said, feigning surrender. "You are right. I trust you. You have always been good with money." I signed the paper. But I didn't sign my name. I signed a scribble that looked like my name but was legally illegible. It was a trick I learned years ago to buy time in hostile negotiations. If he looked closely, he would see it. But he didn't look. He snatched the paper the moment the pen lifted, folding it and shoving it into his pocket as if it were a winning lottery ticket. "Thank you, Dad." He breathed, the relief washing over him so intensely he almost collapsed. "You won't regret this. I will get the money. I will fix everything." He stood up, checking his watch. "I have to go. I have to meet the buyer. I will call you tomorrow." He didn't ask about my health. He didn't ask if I needed groceries. He turned and practically ran out the door. I watched through the window as he got into his Porsche. He sat there for a moment, making a call. I saw him shouting into the phone, gesturing wildly, then nodding. He revved the engine and sped off, tearing up more of my grass. I sat in the silence, the fake signature hanging in the air between us like a ghost. He was going to try to sell the land, so it was. He would likely try to leverage the signed power of attorney to get a bridge loan from a shark before the sale even went through. He was going to dig himself deeper. But I had seen what I needed to see. The text from Vegas. The time limit. I picked up my phone and dialed Patricia. "He was just here," I said. "Did he take the bait?" she asked. "Hook, line, and sinker," I said. "But Patricia, it is worse than we thought. He is panicked. He is sweating through his suit. He got a text from someone named Vegas saying time is up. He needs cash by 5 p.m. "Gambling," Patricia said. "I knew it. I need you to pull his phone records," I said. "I need to know who Vegas is. If he owes money to a bookie, they might come after Emily if he defaults." "I am on it," she said. "Harrison, if he is that desperate, he is dangerous." "I know," I said, looking at the tire tracks on my lawn. but he is about to find out that he is not the only one running against the clock. I hung up. I had the confirmation. Now I needed the evidence. I needed to hear him say it. I needed to hear him admit his plan so that when I dropped the hammer, he couldn't wiggle out from under it. I stood up and went to the closet. I pulled out a small box from the top shelf. Inside was a listening device, a relic from a corporate espionage case 20 years ago. It was old, but the batteries were fresh. Brandon was coming back. I knew he would. He would come back to look for the deed, or to try and get me to sign more papers when the land sale hit a snag. And when he did, I would be ready. But first I had to make sure my daughter was safe. I couldn't leave her in that house with a man who was being hunted by loan sharks. I walked to the kitchen and poured the glass of water I had wanted earlier. My hand was steady now. The anger had crystallized into a mission. Brandon Cole had come into my house, looked me in the eye, and lied to steal my legacy. He thought he had just secured his lifeline. He didn't know he had just signed his confession. The silence in my bungalow was heavy after Brandon left. It felt less like peace and more like the calm before a tornado touches down. I sat at my kitchen table, the fake signature on the power of attorney form still fresh in my mind, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't take long. 2 hours later, headlights swept across my front window. It wasn't Brandon returning. It was a sleek black sedan. Patricia Knowles walked up my cracked walkway, carrying an expandable file folder that looked thick enough to contain a murder investigation. In a way, I suppose it did. It contained the death of a reputation. She entered without knocking, her face grim. She didn't accept the coffee I offered. She simply sat opposite me, placed the heavy file on the table, and rested her hand on it. "Harrison," she said, her voice lacking its usual professional detachment. "You need to brace yourself. It is worse than we thought. It is much, much worse." I nodded, gesturing for her to open it. I thought I was ready. I thought I knew what a bad financial situation looked like. I had seen companies go bankrupt. I had seen men lose fortunes. But I wasn't prepared for the sheer scale of the deception my son-in-law had constructed. Patricia opened the file. The first document she slid across the table was a personnel report from Apex Capital. It was stamped confidentially. "He is not a partner," Patricia said bluntly. "He is not even a senior manager anymore." I picked up the paper. It was a formal disciplinary notice dated 3 months ago. "He is on a performance improvement plan," she explained. "He is 1 step away from being fired. He hasn't brought in a new client in 6 months. The only reason he is still employed is because he is churning his existing accounts." Churning, I whispered. It was a dirty word in finance. It meant trading assets in a client's account excessively just to generate commission fees. It was unethical. It was illegal. And it was the desperate move of a man who needed quick cash, regardless of how much it cost his clients. "He is stealing from his clients to pay for his lifestyle," I said, looking at the numbers. "He is stealing from everyone," Patricia corrected. She slid the next stack of papers over. These were bank statements, personal accounts, joint accounts, credit card statements. "His primary checking account has a balance of $42, she said. "His savings account is overdrawn. He has maxed out 5 credit cards, Harrison. The total unsecured debt is sitting at roughly $80,000. I looked at the sea of red ink. The Rolex, the wine, the Porsche lease. It was all being paid for with plastic that was about to snap. "But that is just the tip of the iceberg," Patricia said, her voice dropping lower. "You asked about Vegas. You asked about the text message." She pulled out a spreadsheet. It was a forensic reconstruction of his online activity. "Brandon Cole has a gambling problem, Harrison. A massive one. He is not just betting on football games. He is playing high-stakes poker on offshore sites. He is betting on crypto futures with 50 times leverage." She pointed to a figure at the bottom of the page. $400,000, she said. That is what he owes to a collection of offshore sports books and private lenders. These aren't banks. These are the kind of people who don't report to credit bureaus. They report to people who break legs. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. $400,000. That explained the sweat. That explained the panic when he asked for the land. He wasn't trying to invest. He was trying to buy his life back. But where is he getting the money to pay the interest, I asked. If he is broke and he owes this much, how is he keeping them at bay? Patricia looked at me, and for the first time in 30 years, I saw hesitation in her eyes. She didn't want to show me the next document. "Show me," I commanded softly. She slid a document across the table. It was a property title search. "He took out a second mortgage on the house in Lincoln Park," she said. "A high-interest short-term loan, a hard money loan. But the house is in both their names," I said, my heart stopping. "He would need Emily's signature." Patricia pointed to the bottom of the page. There, next to Brandon's frantic scrawl, was a signature that read, "Emily Cole." It was neat. It was precise. And it was a forgery. I knew my daughter's handwriting. I had watched her learn to write. I had read her letters from camp. I had signed her report cards. That was not her signature. It was a careful, practiced imitation. "He forged her signature." I said, the air leaving my lungs. "He committed felony fraud against his own wife," Patricia confirmed. "He pulled out $200,000 of equity 3 weeks ago. It is already gone, Harrison. He wired it to an account in the Cayman Islands, presumably to pay off a portion of the gambling debt." I stared at the forged signature. The anger I had expected to feel didn't come. Instead, I felt a terrifying clarity. This wasn't just a bad marriage. This was a crime scene in progress. My daughter was living in a house that was technically already lost with a man who had committed a felony to betray her, a man who was being hunted by sharks. "If he defaults on this loan," I asked, looking up at Patricia. "They foreclose," she said. "Emily loses the house. She ends up on the street with nothing but her clothes. And given the interest rate on this loan, he will default in less than 2 months if he doesn't find a massive infusion of cash. That is why he needs the land, I realized. The land in Galena. He needs the $2 million not to invest, but to cover the hole he dug before the house of cards collapses. And if he doesn't get it," Patricia said, "the people he owes money to, they aren't going to be polite. If they can't get money from him, they might look at his wife." I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I walked to the window and looked out at the dark street. I felt cold. My daughter was sleeping next to a man who had sold her safety to buy time at a roulette wheel. She was in danger. Immediate physical danger. The $500 she didn't have. The bald tires. It all made sense now. He wasn't investing her money. He had stolen it. He had drained her savings, her emergency fund, everything to feed the beast. "Harrison," Patricia said, standing up behind me. "We have enough. This is fraud. This is grand larceny. We can go to the police right now. We can have him arrested tonight." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "Not yet." "Why?" she asked, surprised. "He is dangerous." "Because if we arrest him tonight, the debts don't go away," I said, turning to face her. "The loan sharks don't care if he is in jail. They will still come for the house. They will still come for Emily. If I lock him up now, the truth comes out in a messy explosion that leaves my daughter homeless and traumatized." "I need to control the explosion," I said. "I need to make sure that when he goes down alone. I need to sever the financial ties before the ship sinks. I need to get the house back. I need to clear the debt in her name, and there is only one way to do that." I looked at the file on the table, the evidence of his ruin. "He thinks he is a shark," I said. "He thinks he is a player. He wants to manage $20 million fine." I am going to give him exactly what he wants." Patricia looked at me confused. "You are going to give him the money, no?" I said, my voice hard as iron. "I am going to give him the rope." I checked my watch. It was late, but the game was moving fast now. "Patricia," I said, "do you know Jameson O'Connell, the CEO of Apex Capital?" "Yes, I know him." "Good," I said, "because 30 years ago he was a kid fresh out of business school with a bad suit and a dream. I gave him his first loan when no bank would touch him. He still sends me a Christmas card every year." I picked up my phone. "I need you to set up a meeting," I told her. "Not with Brandon, with Jameson. Tell him Harrison Caldwell wants to cash in a favor. Tell him I want to make the biggest investment Apex Capital has ever seen. And Patricia, yes. Tell him I want Brandon Cole to run the presentation." Patricia smiled. A sharp, shark-like smile. "You are going to set him up. I am going to put him on the biggest stage of his life," I said. "And then I am going to turn on the lights." Brandon wanted to be a big shot. He wanted to handle the Caldwell fortune. Tomorrow he was going to get his wish. And when he stood up in that boardroom, thinking he had won, thinking he had tricked the stupid old man, I was going to show him and everyone else exactly who he really was. My daughter was sleeping on a burning mattress. It was time to wake her up. And it was time to put out the fire. The silence that filled the bungalow after Patricia left was different from the silence before. It was no longer the quiet of a lonely old man's home. It was the heavy, charged silence of a command center before a strike. The file folder full of financial ruin lay closed on the table, a paper tombstone for my son-in-law's career. But I knew that numbers on a page as damning as they were might not be enough to sever the emotional hold he had on my daughter. Emily was loyal. She was conditioned to believe him. If I showed her spreadsheets, he would spin a story about temporary liquidity issues or complex market strategies. He would gaslight her until she believed that his gambling debts were actually sophisticated hedge fund leverage. I needed something visceral. I needed something undeniable. I needed his own voice. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small black receiver. It looked like an old pager, innocuous and outdated, the kind of thing a retired truck driver might keep around. I set it on the table next to the shattered remains of my dinner. My mind flashed back to earlier that afternoon, to the moment Brandon had barged into my house, sweating and manic demanding. I signed the power of attorney. He had been vibrating with anxiety, his eyes darting to his phone every few seconds. Just before I signed the paper with that illegible scrawl, he had doubled over, clutching his stomach. The stress was eating him alive physically. "I'm going to use your bathroom," he had muttered, not waiting for permission. He had torn off his suit jacket, tossing it carelessly over the back of my dining chair as he rushed down the hallway. It was a careless mistake. A rookie mistake. In the logistics business, you learn to watch for the moment a man gets careless. When I managed the loading docks back in the 90s, I dealt with union toughs and cargo thieves who thought they were smarter than me. I learned how to slip a tracker into a shipment in under 5 seconds. I learned how to plant a listening device during a handshake. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, I had moved. I didn't move like an old man with arthritis. I moved with the precision of a man who had built a fortune on efficiency. I reached into the box on my shelf, grabbed the micro recorder I had prepped earlier, and slid it into the inner lining of his jacket pocket. It was smaller than a stick of gum. It nestled deep into the fabric, invisible to the touch unless you were looking for it. He had come back out, wiped his face, grabbed his jacket without checking it, and snatched the paper I signed. He had walked out of my house thinking he carried his salvation in his pocket. He didn't know he was carrying his execution warrant. Now, hours later, I put on the headphones plugged into the receiver. The device was voice-activated. It had been recording everything Brandon had said since he left my driveway. I pressed play. The audio quality was crystal clear. I heard the slam of his car door. I heard the roar of the Porsche engine as he peeled out of my driveway, tearing up the sod. Then I heard the aggressive tapping of a phone screen followed by the ringing tone of a call over the car's Bluetooth system. "Answer. Come on, answer." Brandon muttered, his voice tight with adrenaline. The line connected. "Hello," a female voice answered. It wasn't Emily. It was smoother, younger, with a vocal fry that grated on my ears. It sounded like the receptionist at Apex, or maybe a junior analyst. "I got it," Brandon shouted, hitting the steering wheel. "I got the signature. The old fool signed it." "Are you serious?" the woman asked. "He didn't ask to see a lawyer." Lawyer Brandon laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "He can barely read the menu at a diner. I told him some story about a tax deadline, and he folded like a cheap suit. I have the power of attorney. I can sell the land tomorrow." I sat in my kitchen, my hand tightening around a glass of water. "That is $2 million, baby," Brandon continued. $2 million cash." "So we are good?" the woman asked. "You can pay off the guy in Vegas." "I can pay off Vegas, I can clear the VIG on the house loan, and I will still have $500,000 left over," he said. "And you know what we are going to do with that $500K? What?" she asked, her voice purring. "We are gone," he said. "Mexico, or maybe Costa Rica, somewhere with no extradition and good tequila. I am done with this town. I am done with the stress." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just trying to pay off debts to save his reputation. He was planning to run. "What about Emily?" the woman asked. She didn't sound concerned, just curious. "What about her?" Brandon scoffed. "Emily is an anchor. She is a dead weight. She has no idea what is happening. She thinks we are saving for a vacation home. She is so stupid, babe. You have no idea. I drained her savings account 3 months ago, and she hasn't even noticed. I forged her name on the second mortgage, and she is still clipping coupons for milk." I felt a physical blow to my chest. He called my daughter stupid. He admitted to the forgery. He admitted to stealing her safety net. "So you are just going to leave her?" the woman asked. "I am going to leave her with the debt," Brandon said, his voice cold and devoid of any humanity. "The house is in both our names, but the debt will stick to the property. Let the bank take it. Let the sharks chase her. By the time they figure it out, we will be on a beach. She can go live with her dad in that dump of a bungalow." I stared at the wall of my kitchen. The wallpaper was peeling in the corner. He thought this was my reality. He thought this was all I had to offer my daughter. "And the old man?" the woman asked. "Won't he come after you?" Harrison Brandon laughed again, louder this time. "Harrison is a corpse walking. The guy is practically senile. He thinks I am a financial genius. He drives a 15-year-old truck and eats cat food for dinner. He doesn't have the resources to find a lost remote, let alone find me in Mexico. He will probably die of a heart attack when he finds out the land money is gone. And honestly, it would be a mercy." The recording continued, filled with their laughter, their plans for margaritas, their mockery of my family. But I had heard enough. I paused the tape. I looked down at the glass of water in my hand. My grip was trembling, not from age, but from a pressure that had built up over years of silence, years of biting my tongue, years of trying to be the humble, supportive father-in-law. I squeezed. The glass shattered. It wasn't a cinematic explosion. It was a sharp, wet crack. Shards of glass bit into my palm. Water and blood mixed on the cheap laminate table, pooling around the heavy file folder. I didn't feel the pain. I stared at the blood dripping from my hand, bright red against the white paper. He called my daughter stupid. He planned to leave her homeless. He planned to leave her to face his violent creditors alone. And he wished for my death. He didn't just want to steal from us. He wanted to discard us like trash. I stood up and walked to the sink. I pulled the shards of glass out of my hand one by one, rinsing the wound under cold water. The pain was sharp, clarifying. It woke up parts of my brain I hadn't used since the hostile takeovers of '98. I wrapped a kitchen towel around my hand and squeezed it tight. The plan had changed. Before tonight, I wanted to teach him a lesson. I wanted to scare him straight, force him to pay back the money, maybe get him some help for his gambling addiction if he showed remorse. I wanted to save the marriage for Emily's sake. But you don't negotiate with a terrorist, and you don't rehabilitate a man who is willing to sacrifice his wife to save his own skin. This was no longer a rescue mission. This was an extermination. I walked back to the table and looked at the recording device. That audio file was the nail in his coffin. But I didn't want to just send him to jail. Jail was too easy. Jail was 3 meals a day and a bed. I wanted to dismantle him. I wanted to strip him of his arrogance, his reputation, his future, and his freedom all in one stroke. I wanted him to stand in a room full of the people he tried to impress and watch his entire life turn into ash. I picked up my phone. It was past midnight, but I knew Jameson O'Connell would be awake. CEOs of billion-dollar firms don't sleep. I dialed the number. Harrison Jameson answered on the first ring, his voice surprised. "Is everything okay?" "I am calling in the favor, Jim," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Name it," he said. "I want to come into the office tomorrow," I said. "I want to transfer my personal portfolio to Apex Capital, $20 million. There was a stunned silence on the line. "Harrison, that is. We would be honored." "But there are conditions," I said. "Anything. I want a full partner meeting. I want the board there. I want every senior manager in the room. And I want Brandon Cole to run the presentation." Brandon Jameson asked, hesitant. "Harrison, honestly, Brandon's numbers haven't been great lately. We were actually discussing letting him go." "No," I said. "I want Brandon. I want him to think he just landed the whale. I want him to think he is the king of the world. Tell him I specifically requested him because of our family connection. Tell him I want to keep it in the family." I could hear the wheels turning in Jameson's head. He didn't know the full story, but he knew me. He knew I didn't do things without a reason. "Okay," Jameson said slowly. "I will set it up for 10 a.m. The big conference room." "One more thing, Jim," I said. "Yes. Have security on standby. And call the police. Tell them you have a case of corporate fraud and grand larceny occurring on your premises. Tell them to wait in the lobby until you give the signal." "Harrison, what is going on?" he asked, his voice dropping. "I am taking out the trash, Jim," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the blood seeping through the towel. It was time to go to sleep. I needed to rest. I needed to be sharp. Tomorrow I wasn't going to be the old man in the windbreaker. Tomorrow I was going to be the executioner. Brandon wanted to go to Mexico. I was going to send him to hell. I stared at the phone screen, the blue light illuminating the bandage wrapped around my hand. It was past midnight, a time when honest men were asleep, and thieves were busy planning their next move. My kitchen was silent save for the hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic throbbing of the cut in my palm. It was a good pain. It was a focusing pain. It reminded me that I was alive, that I was dangerous, and that I had a job to do. I scrolled to a number I had not dialed in years. It was saved simply as Jim. To the rest of the financial world, he was Jameson O'Connell, the ruthless CEO of Apex Capital Partners, a man whose name moved markets and whose approval could launch careers. To me, he was still the 22-year-old kid with a mail-order suit and holes in his shoes, who had walked into my trucking office 30 years ago begging for a chance to audit my books. I remembered that day clearly. He had been shaking, terrified of the rough drivers and the smell of diesel, but his eyes were hungry. He had ambition that burned brighter than his fear. I gave him a job. 3 years later, when he wanted to start his own firm, but the banks laughed him out of the room because he had no collateral, I wrote him a check for $50,000. It was a lot of money back then. I told him he didn't need to pay me back with interest. I told him to pay me back by never forgetting where he came from. He never did. Every Christmas, a bottle of 18-year-old scotch arrived at my door with a handwritten note. He was one of the few people who knew the real Harrison Caldwell, not the shadow I had become. I pressed the call button. The line rang once, twice. Harrison, a voice answered. It was alert, sharp, no trace of sleepiness. Jameson was like me. He didn't sleep when there was opportunity in the air. "Hello, Jim," I said. My voice was gravelly, worn down by the day's events, but hardened by resolve. "I hope I am not disturbing you." "Not at all," he said, and I could hear the genuine warmth in his tone. "I was just reviewing the Asian market opening. It is good to hear your voice, Harrison. It has been too long. How is retirement treating you?" "Retirement is over, Jim," I said. There was a pause on the line, a beat of silence where I knew he was sitting up straighter in his chair. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his tone shifting from friend to problem solver. "No," I said. "Everything is not all right. But it is about to be. I am calling in the favor, Jim." I waited. I didn't need to specify which favor. Between men like us, the ledger is always open. "Name it," he said without hesitation. "I want to come into the office tomorrow morning," I said. 10 a.m. sharp. I want to transfer my personal investment portfolio to Apex Capital. The liquid assets, the real estate holdings, all of it. I heard the sound of a pen dropping on a desk. Harrison Jameson said, his voice stunned. "That is, I mean, we would be honored, truly. But I thought you managed your own funds. I thought you didn't trust the street." "I don't," I said. "But I have $20 million sitting in various accounts that need a new home. And I want Apex to be that home." $20 million, he breathed. "That will make you one of our top individual clients instantly. I will handle the account personally. Or I can assign my senior VP. We will roll out the red carpet." "No," I cut him off. "I don't want you. And I don't want your VP." "Okay," he said, slowly confused. "Who do you want?" "I want Brandon Cole," I said. The silence that followed was heavy. It stretched for 10 seconds, then 20. I could almost hear the gears turning in Jameson's head. He was confused. He was trying to reconcile the name of his worst employee with the request of his most important mentor. Brandon Jameson asked, his voice carefully neutral. "My Brandon Cole." "Yes," I said. "Harrison, look. I have to be honest with you because I owe you that," Jameson said, sounding uncomfortable. "Brandon he is not performing. We have him on a performance improvement plan. His numbers are down. His client retention is abysmal. Frankly, we were drafting his termination paperwork for next week. He is not the man to handle a $20 million portfolio. He will mishandle it." "I know," I said. "You know," he asked. "I know he is incompetent, Jim. I know he is stealing. I know he is a gambler. And I know he is my son-in-law." "Oh," Jameson said. The single word carried a wealth of understanding. "Oh, God." "Harrison, I had no idea he was family. He never mentioned it." "Of course he didn't," I said. "Because he is ashamed of me. He thinks I am a poor, senile old man. He threw me out of your lobby today, Jim. He had security escort me to the curb because my jacket was too old for his image." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "He did what? He humiliated me," I said. "But that is not why I am doing this. I am doing this because he has stolen from my daughter. He has forged her signature on a mortgage. He is planning to take the money from a land sale I am orchestrating and flee the country, leaving her with his debts." Harrison Jameson's voice was cold, now the voice of a CEO who just realized there was a cancer in his building. "What do you need me to do? I need a stage." "Jim," I said, "I want you to set up a meeting. The big conference room. I want the entire board there. I want every senior partner. Tell them it is the signing of the century. Tell them a whale is coming in." "And Brandon," he asked. "Tell Brandon he has been selected to lead the presentation," I said. "Tell him the client specifically requested him. Tell him it is his chance to save his career. I want him to believe he has won. I want him to walk into that room thinking he is the king of Chicago. I want him arrogant. I want him comfortable." "I understand," Jameson said. "You want to build him up so the fall breaks him." "I want to destroy him, Jim," I said. "I want to strip him of his credibility, his license, and his freedom in front of the only people he cares about. I want to expose him so thoroughly that he can never work in finance again." "Done," Jameson said. "I will set it up for 10 a.m. I will tell Brandon first thing in the morning. He will be ecstatic. He is desperate for a win." "He is desperate for a way out," I corrected. "He owes $400,000 to loan sharks. He thinks my $20 million is his ticket to Mexico." "One more thing, Jim," I added. "Anything." "Call the police," I said. "Not the beat cops. Call the Financial Crimes Division. Tell them you have an active case of wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny occurring on your premises. Tell them to have officers waiting in the lobby. I want them ready to move the moment I give the signal." "I can do that," Jameson said. "Harrison, I am so sorry. I had no idea he was doing this under my roof." "It is not your fault," I said. "Snakes are good at hiding in the grass. But tomorrow we cut the grass." "I will see you at 10, Jameson said. "And Harrison." "Yes. Wear the good suit." I hung up the phone and looked down at my bandaged hand. The plan was set. The trap was armed. Brandon Cole was going to wake up tomorrow, thinking it was the best day of his life. He was going to put on his expensive suit strap on his Rolex and look in the mirror and see a winner. He was going to walk into Apex Capital with a swagger, thinking he had fooled everyone. He had no idea that the man he called a clueless old fool was currently coordinating the end of his life with his own boss. I stood up and walked to the bedroom. I didn't go to my bed. I went to the closet where I had hung the garment bag from the storage unit. I unzipped it slowly. Inside was a navy blue Brioni suit tailored to perfection. It was a suit of armor. I ran my hand over the fabric. It felt like power. Next to it was a pair of black Oxford shoes polished until they looked like liquid ink. And in a small box, a vintage Patek Philippe watch, understated elegant and worth more than Brandon's entire year of salary. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I was going to sit in my chair and watch the sun come up. I was going to think about my daughter. I was going to think about the fear in her voice when she told me she had $6. I was going to think about the bald tires. I was going to think about the fake signature on the mortgage. And I was going to let the hate burn everything else away until only the cold, hard resolve remained. Tomorrow, Harrison, the truck driver, was staying home. Tomorrow, Harrison, the father, was going to war. And he was bringing the checkbook. The morning sun broke over Chicago with a deceptive brilliance, casting long, sharp shadows across the city. In my bungalow, the light filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating the suit bag hanging on the closet door like a silent sentinel. It was 7 a.m. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. Adrenaline, cold and steady, pumped through my veins, sharpening my senses. On the kitchen table, the receiver for the listening device hummed with static. I had left it on all night, listening to the silence of my daughter's house, listening for any sign of danger. Now it crackled to life. I poured a cup of black coffee and sat down, putting the earpiece in. I needed to know the enemy's state of mind. I heard the rustle of fabric. Brandon was moving. Then the chime of a phone notification. "Yes." Brandon's voice barked tight with sleep and anxiety. There was a pause, then a gasp, a genuine strangled sound of disbelief. "Mr. O'Connell." Brandon stammered, his tone shifting instantly from groggy to obsequious. Good morning, sir. No, not too early at all. I was just reviewing the Asian markets. I took a sip of coffee. He was lying before his feet even hit the floor. A client? Brandon repeated, his voice rising in excitement. 20 million today, sir. I am honored, truly. You can count on me. I know exactly how to handle high net worth individuals. I will prepare the pitch immediately. 10 a.m. Yes, sir. I will be there. The call ended. I heard a whoop of joy, a manic shout that echoed in the receiver. I did it, Brandon yelled to the empty room. I freaking did it. 20 million, that is a $200,000 commission minimum. Goodbye, Vegas. Goodbye, debt. He was laughing now, a hysterical, breathless laugh. He thought he had won the lottery. He thought the universe had bent to his will just in time to save him. He had no idea the hand extending that lifeline was the same one he had slapped away yesterday. I heard him running down the hall. Emily, wake up. I winced as I heard my daughter's sleepy, confused voice. What is it? Is something wrong? Wrong, everything is right, Brandon shouted. I just got the call. O'Connell gave me the whale. $20 million, Em. I am going to be the top broker. I told you I was a genius. I told you everything would work out. That is great, Brandon, she said, sounding relieved but cautious. Does this mean we can pay off the... Don't worry about the small stuff now. He cut her off. I need my suit. The navy charcoal. Where is it? It is in the closet where it always is, she said. I heard the sound of hangers sliding violently on a metal rod. Then silence. Then a low, dangerous growl. Emily. What? Look at this collar, he hissed. Look at it. It is wrinkled. I told you to iron this yesterday. I told you I needed everything perfect for this week. I did iron it. Emily's voice trembled. Maybe it got crushed in the closet. I can fix it right now. You can fix it, he mocked her. I have to leave in 20 minutes. I am meeting the biggest client of my life, and I look like a slob because you can't do the one simple thing you are supposed to do. You sit around this house all day spending my money, and you can't even keep a shirt pressed. I am sorry. I will do it now. Just give it to me, she pleaded. Forget it, he shouted. I heard the sound of fabric ripping, or maybe a hanger being thrown against the wall. I will wear the gray one. God, you are useless. Do you know how much pressure I am under? Do you have any idea I am out here saving our lives, and you are sabotaging me with wrinkles? I took the earpiece out. My hand was shaking again, but this time I forced it to stop. I placed the cup down carefully. He was abusing her to relieve his own stress. He was blaming her for a wrinkle to mask his own terror. He was a small, small man, and today I was going to make him feel exactly how small he was. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the hot water and let the room fill with steam. I looked at myself in the mirror. The stubble on my chin was white and rough. The hair was messy. The eyes were tired. I reached for the razor. It wasn't a disposable plastic thing. It was a heavy stainless steel safety razor I had kept from my days on the road. I lathered my face with a brush, the scent of sandalwood filling the air. As I dragged the blade across my skin, stripping away the gray stubble, I stripped away the persona of the retired truck driver. I shaved off the hesitation. I shaved off the humility. I shaved off the kindly old man who just wanted to keep the peace. I washed my face with ice-cold water. When I looked up, Harrison, the retiree, was gone. The eyes staring back were hard blue flint. They were the eyes of the man who had stared down union strikes in the 80s. The eyes of the man who had negotiated mergers in the 90s. The eyes of the chairman. I walked to the bedroom and unzipped the garment bag. The Brioni suit hung there, dark navy, impeccable. I took it out. The fabric felt like water and steel woven together. I put on the crisp white shirt, buttoning it all the way to the neck. I fastened the silk tie tying a perfect Windsor knot without even looking in the mirror. My fingers remembered the movements. I stepped into the trousers. They fit perfectly. I slipped on the jacket. It settled onto my shoulders like armor. I fastened the vintage Patek Philippe watch to my wrist. It was understated classic worth more than Brandon's flashy Rolex and his car combined. I looked at the full-length mirror on the back of the door. The man in the reflection didn't look like he belonged in a bungalow. He looked like he owned the block. He looked like he owned the city. I picked up the leather briefcase. It was the same one Brandon had slapped yesterday, but I had cleaned it, polished the leather until it gleamed with a rich antique patina. Inside, alongside the property deeds, was the file Patricia had given me, the evidence of his crimes, the weapon. I walked out to my truck. For a moment, I considered calling a town car. A limousine would be fitting for the chairman. But no. I wanted to drive. I wanted to arrive in my truck. I wanted Brandon to see the Ford F-150 pull up. I wanted him to think just for a second that he could dismiss me again. I wanted the contrast between the vehicle and the man stepping out of it to jar him. I climbed into the cab. The suit felt strange against the worn upholstery, but it felt right. It was a reminder. I was a man of two worlds. I built the empire with my hands, but I ruled it with my mind. Brandon had neither hands nor mind. He had only appetite. I drove toward the city. The traffic on the I-90 was heavy, but I navigated it with aggressive precision. I checked the time. 9:15. At Apex Capital, Brandon was probably pacing the conference room right now. He was probably checking his reflection in the glass, rehearsing his opening lines, imagining the commission check. He was probably thinking about the flight to Mexico. He was high on the drug of false hope. He didn't know that the mysterious VIP wasn't a stranger. He didn't know that the meeting wasn't an interview. It was a sentencing hearing. I pulled off the highway and into the canyon of steel and glass that was downtown Chicago. I drove toward the Apex building. I could see the entrance where the security guards had shoved me yesterday. I pulled the truck right up to the front curb into the no parking zone reserved for emergency vehicles and VIPs. A valet rushed over ready to tell me to move. He saw the old truck and opened his mouth to shout. Then I opened the door. I stepped out. The polished Oxfords hit the pavement. I stood to my full height, buttoning my jacket. The sunlight caught the silk of my tie and the gold of my watch. The valet stopped dead. He looked at the truck, then at me, then back at the truck. The cognitive dissonance paralyzed him. "Keep it running," I said, tossing him a $100 bill. "I won't be long." He caught the bill, stunned. "Yes, sir. Of course, sir." I walked toward the revolving doors. This time I didn't hesitate. This time I didn't look down. I walked with the stride of a man who knows exactly where he is going and exactly what he is going to do when he gets there. I was walking into the lion's den, but the lion was asleep, dreaming of sheep, and I was the butcher. The double doors of the executive conference room were made of frosted glass and mahogany-heavy barriers designed to keep the noise of the trading floor out and the secrets of the boardroom in. Inside, I knew Brandon was pacing. I could imagine him checking his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Chicago skyline, adjusting his tie, rehearsing the lies that he believed would save his life. I nodded to the young assistant standing guard. She looked at my suit, then at my face, and opened the door without a word. I stepped inside. The room smelled of dry erase markers and tension. 12 men and women sat around the massive oval table. These were the senior partners of Apex Capital, the sharks of the industry. At the head of the table, standing in front of a projection screen displaying a graph of projected returns, was Brandon. He was mid-sentence, his hand raised in a gesture of triumphant oratory. "And that is why this portfolio represents not just capital, but a vote of confidence in our aggressive growth strategy," he was saying. his voice booming with a confidence that was entirely unearned. This client specifically requested me because he knows that I have the vision to. He stopped. The words died in his throat, as if someone had cut the power cord. His eyes wide and manic locked onto me. For a moment, the room was silent. The partners turned in their swivel chairs to see what had interrupted the presentation. They saw a man in a navy Brioni suit that fit like a second skin. They saw the Patek Philippe on my wrist. They saw the polished leather briefcase in my hand. They saw Harrison Caldwell, the chairman. But Brandon didn't see the chairman. He saw the ghost of the man he had thrown onto the curb yesterday. He saw the father-in-law he had mocked. He saw a glitch in his reality. His face went from flushed to a sickly pale gray. He blinked rapidly, trying to process the visual data that contradicted everything he believed. "What are you doing here?" He whispered the microphone on the table, picking up the tremor in his voice. Then the panic set in. He reverted to the only defense mechanism he had: aggression. He marched down the length of the table toward me, his face twisting into a snarl. "Security!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "How did he get in here? I told you people to keep him out." He turned to the partners, a desperate, frantic smile plastered on his face. "I am so sorry, everyone. This is my father-in-law. He has dementia. He wanders. He thinks he works here. It is very sad. I will have him removed immediately." He reached for my arm just as he had done yesterday. He reached out to shove me, to dismiss me, to erase me. But this time I didn't move. I didn't stumble. I stood like a statue of iron and granite. "Don't touch me, Brandon," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of 30 years of command. It stopped him cold, his hand hovering inches from my sleeve. Jameson O'Connell stood up from his seat at the far end of the table. "Sit down, Brandon," Jameson said. His tone was not angry. It was icy. It was the voice of a man speaking to an employee who no longer mattered. Brandon froze, looking between me and the CEO. "Sir, you don't understand. This is the man I told you about." "The confused old," I said. "Sit down," Jameson repeated, sharper this time. "And show some respect to our client." Client Brandon mouthed the word, the air leaving his lungs. Jameson gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table, the seat of power. "Mr. Caldwell," Jameson said, bowing his head slightly. "Please. Join us." I walked past Brandon. I didn't look at him. I treated him exactly as he had treated me yesterday, as if he were invisible, a minor annoyance on the way to important business. I walked to the head of the table and placed my leather briefcase on the polished wood. The sound of the heavy brass latches snapping open echoed in the silent room. I took my seat. I looked around the table, making eye contact with every partner. I saw recognition in a few of their eyes. They knew the name Caldwell. They knew the logistics empire. They were doing the math. Then finally I looked at Brandon. He had collapsed into a chair to my right, looking small, looking terrified. He was staring at my suit. He was staring at the watch. He was realizing that the man he thought was eating cat food was wearing his annual salary on his wrist. "Dad," he whispered, his voice shaking. "What is going on?" I reached into the briefcase. I didn't pull out a check. I pulled out the file Patricia had compiled. It was thick, bound in a red folder. I slid it across the table toward him. "We are not here to talk about my investment, Brandon," I said. "We are here to talk about yours." He looked at the folder. He didn't want to open it. "Open it," I commanded. He opened the cover with trembling fingers. The first page was the forensic audit of his gambling debts, the $400,000 owed to offshore books. The second page was the record of the wire transfer to the Cayman Islands. I watched his eyes scan the pages. I watched the realization hit him that I knew everything. You told me yesterday that I lacked financial literacy, I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on him. You told me I was a relic. You told me I should leave the money to the big boys. I leaned forward. So let's review your financials, son. 400,000 in gambling debt. 80,000 in credit card debt. A performance record that is borderline fraudulent. And most interestingly, a second mortgage taken out on a home you co-own with my daughter. Brandon slammed the folder shut. Dad, stop. Not here. Please. We can talk about this outside. We are done talking outside, I said. We are talking here, in the light. I pulled out the second document. It was the copy of the mortgage papers. This is a loan document for $200,000, I said, holding it up for the board to see. It is signed by Brandon Cole and Emily Cole. I turned to the board member on my left, a stern woman with glasses. My daughter Emily has never seen this document, I told her. She did not sign it. This signature is a forgery. That is bank fraud. That is wire fraud. And that is identity theft. The room erupted in murmurs. Brandon was shaking his head, sweat pouring down his face. No, she forgot. She signed it. She just forgot, he babbled, looking for an ally, finding none. And then I pulled out the small black device. The recorder. Brandon stopped speaking. He stared at the device as if it were a pomam. You wanted to go to Mexico, Brandon, I said softly. You wanted to take the money from my land sale, pay off your bookie, and leave my daughter with the debt. You called her an anchor. You called her stupid. I pressed the play button. Brandon's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the boardroom. Con Emily is stupid. I drained her savings account, forged her name. She can go live with her dad in that dump. Harrison is a corpse walking. He will probably die of a heart attack. The silence that followed the recording was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. The partners looked at Brandon with a mixture of disgust and horror. He wasn't just a bad employee anymore. He was a monster. Brandon slumped in his chair. He looked like a man whose soul had been sucked out of his body. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face, snot running from his nose. Dad. I am sorry, he sobbed. I was scared. I didn't mean it. Please, don't do this. I will pay it back. I will fix it. You were right about one thing, Brandon, I said, standing up. He looked up, a flicker of hope in his wet eyes. You said I wandered into the wrong building yesterday, I said. You were right. I should have gone straight to the police station. But I wanted to come here. I wanted to look you in the eye. I wanted you to see the moment you lost everything. I nodded to Jameson. Jameson stood up. He looked at Brandon with pure contempt. Brandon Cole. You are terminated effective immediately for cause, Jameson said. Your access to all systems has been revoked. Your licenses will be reported to the SEC. Brandon stood up, his legs wobbling. I have to go. He turned toward the door, ready to run, ready to flee to his car and drive until he ran out of gas. But the door opened before he could reach it. 2 police officers in uniform stepped in, followed by a detective in a cheap suit. They filled the doorway, blocking the exit. Brandon Cole, the detective said. Brandon stopped. He looked back at me. He looked at the window. He looked at the life he thought he deserved, dissolving into mist. I stepped closer to him. I wanted him to hear this. I wanted this to be the last thing he remembered before the handcuffs clicked. You thought I was weak because I was kind, I whispered. You thought I was poor because I was modest. You forgot the first rule of investment, Brandon. Always do your due diligence. The officers grabbed him. They spun him around. He didn't fight. He was too broken to fight. He just wept, a low, pathetic sound that grated on my nerves. As they marched him out of the room past the stunned partners, past the projection screen that still displayed his ambitious graphs, he looked back one last time. "Harrison," he pleaded, "help me." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had starved my daughter to feed his addiction. "I am helping you," I said. "I am stopping you." The door closed. Brandon was gone. The room was quiet again. I sat back down. My hand throbbed under the bandage. I felt tired, infinitely tired. But I also felt lighter. The tumor had been cut out. The healing could begin. Jameson cleared his throat. "I am sorry you had to do that." "Harrison," he said quietly. I picked up the briefcase. "So am I, Jim," I said. "So am I." But the work wasn't done. The predator was in a cage, but the mess he left behind was still spreading. I had a daughter to save. I had a house to reclaim. And I had a truth to tell that would break her heart before it healed it. I stood up. "Thank you, Jim," I said. "I will be in touch about the portfolio. I still need a manager. But make sure he is honest." I walked out of the conference room. I walked through the lobby where yesterday I had been trash. Today people stepped out of my way. I didn't look at them. I walked out to my truck. I took off the suit jacket and laid it carefully on the seat. I loosened the tie. I started the engine. Now came the hard part. Now I had to go to Emily. The door clicked shut, cutting off Brandon's pathetic wails as if a television had been muted. The silence that rushed back into the conference room was heavy, filled with the unspoken shock of 12 senior partners who had just witnessed a professional execution. I did not look at the door. I did not look at the empty chair where my son-in-law had sat moments ago. I looked at the papers in front of me. Jameson cleared his throat, the sound loud in the quiet room. He looked shaken, his usually stoic face pale. I imagine it is not every day a CEO watches his employee get arrested for defrauding a mentor. "I am sorry," Harrison Jameson said again, his voice low. "We had no idea. We will conduct a full internal audit immediately. If any client money is missing, we will make it whole." "I know you will, Jim," I said calmly. "That is why I am still sitting here." I picked up the heavy fountain pen from the table. It felt cool and solid in my hand, a tool of creation after a morning of destruction. I pulled the transfer documents toward me. The $20 million portfolio. "Do you still want to proceed?" Jameson asked, hesitation in his eyes. "After everything that just happened." I uncapped the pen. The ink was black, permanent. "I do," I said. "But I need a new manager. I don't want a star. I don't want someone who wears a Rolex to impress me or drives a car they can't afford. I want someone who drives a Volvo. I want someone who checks the math 3 times because they are terrified of making a mistake. I want someone boring, Jim." Jameson nodded, a small relieved smile touching his lips. "I have just the person. Her name is Sarah. She has been with us for 10 years. She is the most risk-averse analyst I have ever met." "Perfect," I said. I signed the papers. Harrison Caldwell. The signature flowed effortlessly, reclaiming the name I had hidden for so long. With that stroke of the pen, I wasn't just moving money. I was securing the future. I was building the fortress that would protect what was left of my family. I stood up, closing the briefcase. The leather felt lighter now, unburdened by the weight of the evidence I had carried in. "Thank you, Jim," I said. "I will show myself out." I walked out of the building past the reception desk, where the receptionist now refused to meet my eyes, staring intently at her screen in terrified deference. I walked out to the curb, where my old Ford truck was idling, the valet standing next to it, like a royal guard. I tipped him again and climbed into the cab. I took off the suit jacket, folding it carefully on the passenger seat. I loosened the silk tie. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old coffee and diesel. The executioner was done. Now the father had to go to work. I drove to Lincoln Park. The house looked different to me now. Before it had looked like success. Now it looked like a trap. It looked like a crime scene. I parked in the driveway, blocking the garage where Brandon's Porsche usually sat. I walked to the front door and unlocked it with the key Emily had given me years ago. "Emily," I called out. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard a sound from the kitchen, the clinking of a spoon against a bowl. I walked in. Emily was standing at the counter feeding my 3-year-old grandson Leo. My granddaughter Sophie was coloring at the table. Emily looked up, her eyes red and puffy. She was wearing the same clothes she had worn yesterday. She looked exhausted, a woman holding up the sky with trembling arms. "Dad," she gasped, seeing my suit pants and the dress shirt. "What are you doing here?" Brandon said you weren't allowed." "Brandon is not coming home, Emily," I said gently. She froze the spoon hovering halfway to Leo's mouth. "What do you mean?" I walked over to her. I took the spoon from her hand and set it down. I took her hands in mine. They were cold. "Brandon was arrested this morning," I told her. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. "He has been stealing, Emily. He has been stealing from his clients. He has been stealing from his firm. And he has been stealing from you." "No," she whispered, pulling her hands away. "That is not true. He is just stressed. He forged your signature on a second mortgage." I said, my voice firm but soft. "He took $200,000 of equity out of this house and sent it to an offshore account. He gambled it away, honey. He owes money to dangerous people. And he was planning to leave the country." I saw the denial warring with the truth in her eyes. She wanted to defend him. She wanted to believe the lie because the lie was safe. The lie was a home. The truth was homelessness. He called me stupid," I said, playing the final card. I heard him. "He told his mistress that you were stupid for not noticing. He said he was going to leave you with the debt and run." The word mistress broke her. She collapsed against the counter, sliding down to the floor. I caught her before she hit the tiles. She sobbed into my chest, a deep guttural sound of heartbreak and liberation. Leo started to cry in his high chair, confused by his mother's pain. I held her for a minute, letting her mourn the life she thought she had. Then I pulled her up. "We have to go," I said. "Go where she asked," wiping her face. "We have nowhere to go. The bank. If what you say is true, the bank will take the house." "Let them take it," I said. "It is just bricks and drywall. It is not a home. Pack a bag for the kids. Pack a bag for yourself. Just the essentials. Leave the rest." "But where, Dad?" she pleaded. "Your bungalow is too small. We can't impose." "Trust me," I said. 30 minutes later, the truck was loaded. Emily sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, shell-shocked. The kids were buckled in the back, clutching their favorite toys. I drove north, away from the city, away from the lies. We drove for an hour. The concrete skyline of Chicago faded in the rearview mirror, replaced by the green tree line of Lake Forest. Emily didn't ask questions. She was too tired to ask. I pulled up to a set of wrought iron gates. They were tall, imposing, topped with gold leaf. I rolled down the window and punched a code into the keypad. The gates swung open silently. "Dad," Emily said, sitting up. "Where are we? This is the old estate." I didn't answer. I drove up the long, winding driveway lined with oak trees. At the end of the drive stood the house. It wasn't a house. It was a manor. Stone walls, slate roof, sprawling gardens. It was the house I had bought for Catherine 20 years ago. The house I had told everyone I sold. I parked in front of the massive oak doors. "We are home," I said. Emily looked at me, confusion knitting her brow. "But you sold it. You told us you sold it when Mom died. You said you lost the money in the recession." "I lied," I said. I turned off the engine and turned to face her. "I didn't lose the money, Emily. I hid it. I was afraid. I saw what money did to people. I saw how it made them weak. I wanted you to be strong. I wanted you to build your own life without the crutch of my checkbook." I reached over and brushed a tear from her cheek. "But I made a mistake," I whispered. "I thought I was teaching you independence. Instead, I left you vulnerable. I let you think you were poor so you would accept scraps from a man like Brandon. I let you struggle when I could have made you safe." I opened the door and stepped out. I walked around and opened her door. "This house is yours," I said. "The trust is in your name. The accounts are in your name. You are not poor, Emily. You never were. You are safe. And no one, not a bank, not a husband, not a shark, is ever going to hurt you again." She stepped out of the truck. She looked up at the house, then at me. Fresh tears spilled over, but these were different. These were tears of relief. "Dad," she choked out. I hugged her. I held her tight, feeling the tension finally leave her body. "Go inside," I said. "The staff is expecting us. There is hot food. There are warm beds." I watched her walk up the steps holding Leo and Sophie's hands. The door opened, and warm light spilled out onto the stone. They disappeared inside. I didn't follow them immediately. I walked around the side of the house to the garden. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the manicured lawn. I could hear the kids laughing through the open French doors. They were already playing resilient and adaptable. I leaned against the stone railing of the terrace. I looked down at my hands. The bandage was still there, a reminder of the glass I had crushed. I used to think money was the enemy. I used to think it corrupted the soul. And it does if you use it to buy watches and status and power over others. But standing there listening to my grandchildren laugh in a house that could not be taken away from them, I realized I had been wrong. Money isn't the enemy. It is a tool. It is a shield to keep the wolves at the door. It is a sword to cut down the monsters who threaten your blood. I took a deep breath of the clean, expensive air. Harrison, the truck driver, was gone. Harrison, the retiree, was gone. The chairman was home, and his family was safe. I used to believe that hiding my wealth was the only way to teach my daughter independence. I was wrong. By making myself small, I left room for a predator to grow tall. I learned that money is neither good nor evil. It is simply a magnifier. It exposes the greed in some and the resilience in others. A father's duty isn't just to provide. It is to protect, even if it means destroying the illusion of peace to save the reality of family. True strength isn't in silence. It is in action when the people you love are threatened. If you agree that a parent must do whatever it takes to protect their child, hit that like button. Have you ever had to cut toxic family out of your life to save yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice served.